Hello, Southern California, and welcome to this week's episode of Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. I'm your host, Kristin Oakley, and joining me in the studio is the man himself, Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management, based right here in Southern California. Today's show is a very exciting topic. The title is Everything You've Ever Wanted to Know About Generational Wealth, but Were Afraid to Ask. But before we dive into today's subject matter, we need to celebrate, Tom, that this is your 50th television episode. Congratulations.
Hey, we should break into 𝗓𝗲𝗶𝗹𝗶, you know, and stuff. When I was associated with the 𝗓𝗲𝗶𝗶𝗶 football team way back in the 70s and 80s when they were great, and we would get to the playoffs, and at that time you had to win 5 games in Texas to win state, and the crowd would go crazy as the band would play 𝗓𝗲𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶. Can you believe 50 shows that we've done? And one of the things that I do still with football is I do the PA address for our local high school football games. I'm up in the booth, you know, calling the tackles and things like that. And the guy who was my spotter told me last year, he said, "Yeah, I watched your infomercial."
And you're like, my what?
Yeah, and I was like insulted. I said, those are shows. I said, we do a different show every week. Sometimes we repeat because we get preempted on certain football games and basketball games. So if you miss us one week, just keep looking for Right on the Money, but we'll be back there. But this is not an infomercial. We do come up with different subjects as much as we can every single week, and I'm excited about this topic.
I am too, because I feel like this is a subject that we are hearing a lot more about. I know, especially in younger generations, there's a real desire and motivation to build generational wealth. But what does that really mean? What does that really look like? What are the things that you need to know about it? And so that's what we're going to be unpacking together today.
Yeah, so many parents come to me and they say, would you please talk to my child about saving money, getting involved in their 401k. And I generally come back and say, you know, they're not going to listen to me because they don't listen to you either. And you and I have a common friend, 𝗕𝘂𝗶𝗹𝗶𝗁, who's written a book called The Latte Factor. And it's about a 110, 115 page book. And it is a great book to help you what we're talking about in this first segment. If you're young or you're just starting out, or you say, you know, my family's been poor for generations, and I would like to break that cycle. In this first segment today, we're going to talk about some things you can do to put yourself on solid ground so that you can build generational wealth. And I hope you listen. Very few will, but if you listen, you can be so far ahead of the game in building generational wealth and breaking a cycle of poverty or low income or not having enough money or not being able to enjoy life. That's what I want to do in this first segment.
Perfect. Well, the way we're going to structure today's show, 3 sections. Generational wealth, we're going to first talk about making it. Then we're going to talk about receiving it, and finally talking about passing it on. So first up, making it. So Tom, how does one turn their income into generational wealth?
Well, you turn it into generational wealth first by thinking of yourself. And I know we're supposed to say, think of others, you know, give to others. But before you can really give to others the right way, you've got to be strong yourself. So I would tell you, if you're wanting to build generational wealth, you need to start saving for your own retirement. You need to take advantage. So many young people that we get referred to by our clients, and they say, could you talk to my son? Could you talk to my daughter? And you come in to meet with us and we say, okay, are you saving in your company's 401k plan? No. Does your company match? Yes. That's automatically free money. So if you're serious about it, if you're not serious about it, it doesn't do you any good, okay? You're just wasting time to even listen. But if you are serious about it, you need to get involved in your company's 401k plan. You don't have one? That's okay. The government has one for you called an IRA plan, where you can put not as much money, but you can build your own individual retirement account. But you got to start saving for the long distance future, not for what you're going to spend at the bar on Friday night and Saturday night. You've got to start saving for what you're going to spend when you're 65 and 70 and 80 and 85 and 90. And who knows how long people will live when younger people get older.
And the key is, I've been talking a lot to my nieces and nephews. So, my husband and I don't have our own children, but we have 10 nieces and nephews that we support. And that's what we have drilled into them is the sooner you start, the easier it's going to be.
Early and often.
Yeah.
It's like people vote in some areas, early and often. You've got to get out there. You've got to save as much as you can. And one good way to do that, Kristin, is if you're out there and through the year, you're going to get raises through the years. As you get a raise, split the raise. Give your 401k a raise and give yourself a raise. That way you still get to enjoy a bit of raises and earning money, but put money in that 401k and build that up to the max. You will never regret that. Nobody's ever come into my office and say, Tom, I'm afraid we've saved too much money for retirement. If you're out there, come in and meet with me. I'd like to meet with you. You're a unicorn. It's never happened before. But the first thing in building generational wealth is taking care of your own retirement.
Absolutely. Well, it's really interesting because the next thing on the list is buy a house. And I know that we are in a very unique time right now with interest rates out of control, or higher than they've been for most people's lifetimes, right? We know that way back when they were a lot higher than what they are today. But talk about how a home can be an integral part of building generational wealth.
In our history, very few things that people absolutely have to have, if anything, has ever appreciated at the same rate that an individual house or a residence has done for people. Now, don't cry to me about 6 and 7% interest rates. When I first bought my first house back in the 70s, I went to church and I was bragging to everybody because I got a 15.3% first mortgage and they gave me a second note on it so I could put the down payment, and the second note was for 21.5%. That was back during the late 70s. Some of you guys might remember that if you're older and you're listening to this. So at whatever point you can be, now, and maybe you don't have a down payment yet, this is a great time to start saving money for a down payment. I've got kids, and some of them were close to getting enough for a down payment and getting into a house here in Southern California. And what happened, Kristin, is all of a sudden the interest rates just drove those prices even further away.
Right.
The interest rates have moved the cheese. Well, when the cheese comes back closer, you be prepared to buy a house. Get into a house. It can be a starter house, and let that house then grow in value. And then when your family, if you choose to have a family, the family continues to grow, then move to a bigger house. But get in a house as soon as you can. It is a great place to build wealth for something you have to have.
Right, absolutely. As you say on the show all the time, you don't know anyone who doesn't want to live in a house, right?
Everybody that talks to us wants to live into a house.
Yes, for sure.
All right.
Well, what are some other key tips when you think about this whole conversation of making and creating generational wealth?
For time, let me run through some of the things that are on there. You need to diversify your assets. You don't need to save that money for a down payment for the house in the 401k. Your 401k is long-term money, not short-term money like for a down payment in a house. So diversify your assets, and you need to save for education. If you're younger and you've got children, don't get waylaid when they turn 18 and they want to go to the University of Oregon like my daughter went. And I jokingly say that's where my first 401k went, was to pay for that. But be prepared for that, because you're going to want to do what you can do for your children. And that education is going to build for them what they need. And be tax efficient with what you're doing. If you're saving for retirement and you can afford to go ahead and pay the tax, watch this swallow. Go ahead and pay the tax now and get it into a Roth. If you've got a Roth 401k, you pay the tax on it before it goes in there. It's already done. All of these things, you say, well, I'd rather have a regular 401k or a regular IRA because it bills to a bigger total. It's not all your money. You've got to understand that. So all of these things go into building wealth. And here's another thing. If you're young and you have a family, and you have babies, you have children, you have a mortgage, you need life insurance. Because you probably had friends, not you. You're never going to have that happen to you. They weren't either, but they passed away at an early age, and you need some kind of life insurance coverage. So if you're out there and you say, I want to build generational wealth, how do I do it? The best thing you can do is call us. and get on our calendar, because we don't just work for retirees and with retirees. We help people in their retirement years, but we also help people build generational wealth. You're only a phone call away.
And it's so much fun to help people build that wealth.
Yes.
I know you love doing that as well. So we encourage you. This is for no cost, no charge, no obligation. It's simply an invitation to have a conversation to see how the team of Moseley Wealth Management can help and serve you wherever you are in this process of building generational wealth and on your path to retirement. That number to call to claim yours is 866-709-1462. Or if you'd rather not talk to someone right now, but you do have your smartphone handy, don't worry, we've got you covered. Simply pull it out. If you open up that camera app, you can point, click, and scan that QR code that you see there down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary visit and appointment that way as well. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to dive deeply into what happens if you are the recipient of generational wealth. How can you make sure that you are going to receive that wealth in the most tax-efficient manner possible, along with other implications you need to be aware of? Stay with us.
Fiduciary is a big word in our industry, and fiduciary means you act in a client's best interest. At Moseley Wealth Management, you are an individual. You're different than anybody else on this planet. You look different. You've got a different social security number. You live at a different address. Everything about you is different. The first visit is just getting to know them, getting to know where they are. We literally start with a blank legal pad. And at the end of that meeting, we just say, okay, you've brought a lot of stuff here. Do you want us to look at this stuff and see what we would recommend? And when I look at statements that people bring me from so-called fiduciaries, and I ask them, I say, why did you get put 50% in this and 50% in this? Many times they'll say, well, that's what the advisor said he likes to do. My question is, would I do this for my mom? Would I do this for my dad? Would I do this for myself? So you really have to sit back sometimes and say, if I were them, if I were sitting on their side of the table, what would I do? And I've literally sat in my office at least once every 2 or 3 weeks and try to put together a case for somebody where it's iffy as to whether they'll make it or not. And you have to ask yourself, what would I do if I were in their situation? And never, ever recommend something that you wouldn't do if you were right where they are.
Welcome back, Southern California. You're watching Right on the Money with Tom Moseley. I'm your host, Kristin Oakley. Today, Tom and I are discussing all things generational wealth, everything you ever wanted to know about it, but were afraid to ask. And Tom, in the first segment, we talked a lot about making generational wealth, how to create it. You gave some really good tips on how folks, no matter what their age currently is, can start planning to build that generational wealth for their families. We need to talk now about handling inherited generational wealth. This is a really big situation that I think a lot of folks are often very unprepared to handle, and how you handle it and some of those decisions you make right at the beginning can really set the tone for how this generational wealth is going to play out in your family.
You really can. You know, that there's been books that have been written about lottery winners. And I remember when I was working for the Dallas Mavericks, when I was going to Dallas Theological Seminary, and we interviewed Bob Houseworth. He's passed away now, but he was the first winner of the Publishers Clearinghouse, lottery. And I remember we interviewed him, and he had bought diamond rings for every hand, and he had bought several houses. And I've read the story of his life later, and within just a few short years, all of that wealth had passed away.
Wow.
All of that wealth had gone, and that's so indicative of people who have money. I have a case right now where I'm still dealing with the lady that my dad was married to when he was alive, that the very last few years, and she really helped him tremendously. But my dad left her a nice, large sum of money, and she started taking cruises and taking her whole family with them. They went to Europe for 3 weeks, and within 2 years, she's living in a house that I own. She was coming to me and saying, I can't afford to pay the taxes, I can't afford to pay the insurance, and now for about 10 years, I've been paying all of that myself, and that was her responsibility, according to my dad's trust, to pay it, because she got a huge sum of money, but she didn't know how to handle it. So if you are in the receipt of a large inherited wealth, I've got two things to tell you about. You've got two friends. You need to have a tax professional who's your friend, and you need to have a financial planner who's your friend. The tax professional, you've got to have more than just somebody who does your 1040s at the end of the year. You can't have a guy who calls you or a lady who calls you in March and say, get your stuff in, and they call you in the 1st of April, I got your stuff ready, because they're all looking back in the rearview mirror. You've got to have somebody, if you've inherited generational wealth, you've got to have somebody who's looking down the road and saying, in the passing of this from your loved ones to now, some things are too late to change, but in the passing, how do we handle it? For instance, if your parents pass away, I've had this recently, and one lady had a $1.8 million IRA, and she passed it on to her single one daughter. Well, this one daughter has inherited a $1.8 million IRA, and when she came in to talk to us, she had no idea that she's got to take all of that $1.8 million out and pay tax at regular income rates over the next 10 years. That IRA, that inherited IRA, that beneficiary IRA has got to be drained within the next 10 years. Now, this lady makes about $200,000 a year. So she's making $200,000 a year, and even if she has no growth within that IRA for the next 10 years, she's going to have to take another $180,000 a year, or 1 year just bite the bullet. And that's where you need a tax planner. A tax preparer is not going to do it. A really good CPA to help you. How do we take this out? How do we pass it? We also do that. We are not CPAs, but we can tell you how to drain down that inherited IRA so that it saves you as much money as possible on taxes. So taxes are the real big issue. Also, are you inheriting a house? All right? Are you inheriting a house? Really important that you realize how to transfer that house from yourself to other people. I've also had an issue recently where before they were working with us, this person came to us after their parents had passed away, and they wanted the one daughter to be in charge of all of the IRA.
Right.
And there were 5 kids. And they wanted that one daughter to inherit the IRA and then pass it to all 5 kids.
She doesn't legally have to, right?
She doesn't legally have to. There's some ways to do it, but if you just start writing checks for that IRA, the tax is all going to fall on you.
Right.
If you're that person. So that's why you need a tax planner and a financial planner. Say, what's the financial planner for? If you've never had wealth and you've received wealth, you need to know what to do with it. You don't need to be like a lottery winner. You don't need to be like somebody who was left a lot of money and don't know how to handle it, because you have not sacrificed for that. So you just inherently, you don't know the value of that. So it is so important to work with a financial planner to get a long-term financial plan in place. See, here's what I like about it. I grew up on a farm in South Georgia, and we were very poor. We were very poor, but my dad, over a period of time, making very little money per year, but he did what we talked about in the first segment. He built generational wealth to pass on, and he passed it on to us. And there were 2 of us, 2 brothers, still 2 brothers, but there's one, me, that has taken that and flourished it and grown it, and one that has taken it and squandered it. Don't be the one in your family that takes that. You're ahead of the 8 ball. You're not behind the 8 ball. You might have been behind the 8 ball all your life, and you've never known what it was like to be able to go on cruises and to go to Europe and to do these kind of things. But what you need to know is you can't do it all immediately. You've got to let that grow, and you need to build a plan with a financial planner if you've inherited generational wealth, so that stays generational wealth. And it doesn't stop with your generation, but it passes on to the next generation. And that's one of the things that I love for people to come to work with us. And And each year, because we're not brokers, we're not brokers that we see you one time and the next time you go to talk to somebody, you talk to somebody different. And the next time it's the next kid they hired straight out of college who took over your account. We work with our people through the years. And I love it when I can sit down with the people and I can say, this is what you had last year. We took this much money out and you still have this much money or more this year. And through the years, if you've inherited generational wealth, what you should really consider trying to do is to continue to grow that generational wealth so that you can then pass it on again to the next generation. Real important when you've received it that you're able to pass it on. And that's what we're going to talk about in the last segment. We can help you. If you've inherited it, don't squander it. Please get with somebody who's going to build a real plan for you.
Yes, and help walk that and navigate that road. You know, there's another note in here too about grieving but not grabbing.
Right.
I'd love for you just to share briefly on that because there's a psychological and emotional component that goes into this. It's not just about the money.
Right. You know, the sad thing is I've seen so many people and I've worked with so many people right after they've had a loved one pass away. And there seem to be into two categories in almost every family, the grievers and the grabbers. They're the grievers who are grieving that they've lost the loved one, and they're the grabbers who are wondering what they left us. What do I get? What's my part of it? How can I get my part of it? We've even had people know that we work with their grandparents or parents, and they've called us up directly. We can't talk to them because they don't have the right for us to talk to them yet. But they call up, and the first thing on their mind, Kristin, is how much do I get? Okay, so you need to be the griever, not the grabber, but you also need to think about how am I going to keep this, grow this, and pass it on.
And to be a good steward of it, for sure.
A good steward,
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, if you would like some help navigating that road within your own family, this is one of the great things that you can talk about when you come in for that complimentary retirement blueprint with Tom and the team of Moseley Wealth Management. To claim your opportunity to do so, all you need to do is call that number, 866-709-1462, or again, you're welcome to scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. When we come back, as Tom said, we're going to be talking about passing on generational wealth. Stay with us.
They've got quite an extensive resume. Wow, so many years of management. Bet that was fun. So this job requires basic knowledge of the social media and video platforms, content creation, and SEO. How proficient are you in those areas?
Going back to work after retiring is not ideal. I'm Tom Moseley with Moseley Wealth Management. If you have amassed a nest egg, it's time for a financial advisor to help you reach your retirement goals. This is one of the greatest tax windows in history. Now is the time to take advantage of this tax discount while you can. We specialize in retirement planning, tax mitigation, estate planning, and much more. Plan your retirement right. Call now for your portfolio review and tax analysis.
Welcome back to Right on the Money with Tom Moseley. I'm Kristin Oakley, and today we are talking about all things generational wealth, everything you ever wanted to know but were afraid to ask. Tom, it's that time in the show now where we need to talk about passing on generational wealth. I know that this is something that folks can really dive deeply into with you when you build a customized, personalized retirement blueprint for them. So let's talk about this, because that's an important phase of this whole conversation with generational wealth.
Yeah, it really is. You want to grow it and not blow it. You know what I'm saying? You want to continue to grow it. And one of the biggest ways you can blow it is blowing it and passing it along to your descendants and to your heirs from a tax perspective. Now, let me just show you some things. If you've got highly appreciated stock that if you sell it, you're going to have to pay the capital gains on it. One of the great things you can do is pass along that stock to your heirs, because then they receive it with what's called a step up in basis. The same way, I've coached some people in the last few years of their life that have been working with us, don't sell the house. Because in Southern California, some of them bought a house for $200,000,
right,
and it's now worth $1.5 million. And so I say, don't sell the house, because even with all the improvements and you're living in it and all of those things, you may still have $700,000, $800,000 worth of capital gains to negotiate that you're going to have to pay tax on. Whereas current law, if you pass away and you keep the house and you pass away, your heirs inherit it with a step up in basis to the value the day that you've passed away. Now, I'm not a tax attorney. You get your tax information from tax attorneys and from real estate people, but I know what I'm talking about is true because I've lived it with so many people. So selling that house early so you don't, that's one thing you want to hang on to, and it's not going to be a burden, but if you sold it, it might be a burden.
Right. Yeah. And that's important the important distinction to plan. And so much, there's so many unknowns, I think, that folks are navigating. We've seen this in our own family as well of, do I sell, do I not sell? If so, when? Because of all these different tax implications. But also in 2024, now there is talk of the estate law changing. So we need to address that as well.
Yeah, you can pass away like well over $11 million. Each individual can pass that along to your children. But with the 2025 tax laws, they're probably going to look at that. They're probably going to, some states, I know Massachusetts, I've got buddies who do the same thing I do in Massachusetts and New York, and their state estate tax is $1 million. So everything over that you pass to your children is going to be taxed. So here's the deal. You're going through so many things. Your kids are going to be going through so many things. Get your estate plan in place so that you know and you've thought through these things with a tax professional and a financial planner as to how you're going to pass. Because your kids or your spouse, they're going to be going through sadness, loss, grief, emotional things. I tell a lot of our people, like I just had a very dear person pass away at 64. And they've been with me for about 9 years. And he passed away of a very horrible cancer. And I told his wife, I said, don't do anything for 6 months. Just settle for 6 months. And you've got to take care of yourself and get through that system. But you need to passing away, do some things to leave this to your kids and to leave it in the right way so that you don't squander it in the way that you pass it. Really important that you get a plan in place with a tax professional and with a financial planner.
And it's about leaving that legacy of peace versus strife, right? It's one of the most loving things you can do to make sure that everything is in order and passes the way you want it to.
And again, if your parents didn't have their act together, you'll have your act together.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, thank you for this important conversation. We hope that you have found this to be helpful and valuable to you. If you would like help navigating generational wealth in your family, we encourage you to pick up the phone and call 866-709-1462 and schedule your complimentary retirement blueprint session. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next week, be safe, be happy, be blessed. We look forward to seeing you next time.